First of all, thanks for joining us on our How to Plan Your Salesforce Implementation webinar. I'm Sam and I'm joined by my colleague Sarah. Between us, we have been using Salesforce for over 10 years and we work on projects with our customers, helping them set up and with their ongoing use of Salesforce. Planning for your implementation can be a tricky process, but it's one of the keys to making sure that your implementation runs smoothly. Having a well planned out project is going to mean that things are less stressful for you and for those that are managing it. And it's also going to make sure that you achieve your goals and get a system that's fit for purpose and gives you the best return on your investment. So what are we going to be talking through today? Some of the key stages and ideas and tips that we've got to take you through the planning process. We've been doing this for over 17 years, so hopefully you're going to find this useful. So we're going to be covering setting your objectives, making the decision on whether or not you should self-implement or use a partner. We're going to be talking about how to gather and prioritise your requirements. We're going to be talking a little bit around external integrations. Something that can be forgotten is managing the change and looking after all the users that are involved. And then, of course, everybody's favourite subject, which is preparing your data. But first of all, just a very, very quick introduction to who Xenogenics are. So we were founded back in 2002 as a business process improvement consultancy. After using Salesforce ourselves, we spotted that there was an opportunity that other companies might want to tailor Salesforce to their own business processes. So we became a partner with Salesforce back in 2007. Since then, we've grown from 2 employees to 26 of us. These are mostly consultants who work on customer projects across the whole of Salesforce. We specialise in getting customers' whole business onto Salesforce. So we've got strategic partnerships in place so we can automate every process from lead generation to money in the bank and customer services. So we're running this webinar today just to give you some ideas on how you can start to plan your Salesforce implementation. As I said, we've been doing this for 16 years, and we've got over 300 brand new Salesforce implementations underneath our belts. We're also incredibly proud of our CSAT score, which you can see in the screen there. Currently, it stands at 4.9 out of 5, which is one of the highest in the industry. And we've got many satisfied customers who have gone through this process with us. So what is the first step in planning your Salesforce implementation? As with any successful project, we should always start by thinking about what is it that we actually want to achieve. This is going to help us to give the project a direction and lead us in our decision-making process throughout the implementation. It also helps us to align our business goals and provides a measurement for benchmarking both during and after the initial implementation. If we're not all striving towards the same goals and objectives, then different stakeholders can be pulling in different directions, which can result in the project derailing or the project not getting the results that we're looking for. A strong set of objectives can help us to prioritise which features we want to use within Salesforce and work out which are the most important to our business. It's also vitally important to think about how you might want to use Salesforce in the future as your business grows and changes. So how do you define your objectives? It can help if you ask yourself these key questions. What are the business goals that we want to achieve with the implementation of Salesforce? These could be related to your revenue growth, perhaps your customer acquisition, customer retention, or operational efficiency. So what does success look like for you? What are the KPIs that we're going to use to measure our progress towards these business goals? For example, if your goal is to increase your revenue growth, your KPIs might include the number of leads that you generate, the conversion rates of those leads, and the average deal size. What are the stages of the sales process and the key actions and metrics associated with each of these stages? You'll map the sales processes out in detail later on when you're gathering your requirements. But having a high-level understanding of all of these stages can help you define your objectives, because this understanding will help you identify the areas where Salesforce can be leveraged to improve your efficiency and effectiveness. So what are some of the pain points that your teams face regularly? This one is usually quite easy to get information on, as people love to talk about their pain points. So things that this might include are like the sales reps not having access to their customer or lead data when they need it, or those all-consuming, time-consuming administrative tasks. It might also be useful to think about which parts of people's day feel particularly inefficient. So some of those can be the biggest wins when it comes to transitioning over to Salesforce. Obviously, it's not all negative. We've covered the negatives, so how about looking at some positives now? So which parts of your processes are currently going really well that you might want to mimic within Salesforce? Or are there any really exciting features that you've seen during demos of Salesforce that you feel you could use? Once you've answered these questions, you can come up with your objectives and you can ensure that all stakeholders are in agreement with the objectives before beginning the next phase of your planning. So talking about those all-important stakeholders, it's critical that before you begin your project, you put together your project team. You need to decide on who's going to take which roles and what their responsibilities are going to be. So ultimately, who is responsible for any decisions needed, and do they have the authority to make those decisions? Are they responsible for the budget and the timeline of the project? And will they have the final sign-off if something can't be agreed? Who's going to be your project manager? So who will be responsible for pushing that project towards meeting your goals and objectives? Additionally, it's always a really great idea to line up some super users. These are the people within your team that are going to be the Salesforce advocates for your business. They're going to help with training and disseminating all of the information. They're also really important in identifying any potential issues that can be involved in the user acceptance testing phase of your project. So the next thing for you to then think about is your timeline. So when you're thinking about the timeline for your Salesforce implementation, it's important to first think about the things that can make the implementation vary in its complexity. So one thing that can have an effect on this is the scale of your company. So the more employees that you have, the likelihood is that the more complex the implementation is going to be. So how many transactions your company makes can also increase the scope of the project. As the more transactions you've got, the more complex your Salesforce org is going to be. Geographical location can also play a factor here too. If you've got all of your employees sat in one office, obviously that's going to be a much simpler implementation than having loads of offices around the world. The other thing that can be effective here is the business processes. If you've got really complex business processes, the longer this is going to take to translate over into Salesforce. It's also really important when you're setting your timeline to think about anything event-wise that your business is facing that might get in the way of this implementation. So, for example, during year end, you might need your users focused elsewhere on their tasks rather than learning new systems. So completing a project overview of which tasks need to be done along the way can really help towards defining this timeline. So make sure that you split the project down into phases and estimate the time that you think it's going to take to complete each phase. You should also include things in this like customization, configuration, data migration, and testing. You can then move towards allocating all of those resources that you need for your project. So think about who needs to be involved and if they have the time during that project to devote to the tasks. So if you've got something that's absolutely critical to your project, but they're likely to be too busy during that time period, then this is obviously going to lengthen your time frame. Training can also add to the complexity of your timeline. So if you have a huge team who are scattered across the world and they're going to need to train in different languages, this should definitely be considered too. So now we're going to hand over to my colleague Sarah, who's going to talk you through a few more steps.
Brilliant. Thank you, Sam. So any organisation using Salesforce needs some kind of implementation to get the system set up to tailor it to your unique business needs. It's not really going to work for everyone straight out of the box. So a key decision in the process of implementation is deciding whether to use a Salesforce partner or whether to go it alone and self-implement. This is a really important decision, and it can really define the success or failure of your project. So it's worth thinking about some questions to guide what you choose to do. So have you already got the knowledge in-house to complete the full implementation in line with the objectives that you've already set that Sam talked about earlier? And if we do have someone, has that person got the time to devote to setting Salesforce up for you? It's also worth thinking about how tight are your timescales. It can often be that if you really want to get up and running quickly, a partner may be the best choice, as they're going to have a project plan and devote themselves to completing your project on time. It can also be the case that using a partner could potentially be cheaper than employing an admin that's going to be in-house. So do go out and get some quotes, find out how much a partner is going to charge you to do your implementation, and compare that to the cost of taking someone off of their full-time job or employing someone specifically to do this. So it's also relevant to think about your longer term plans. So a partner can often have a really longer term view, and they can create you a roadmap for both your implementation but also beyond. So there'll be experience in seeing the longer term picture, which may be a benefit to you, so that Salesforce can flex and grow with your business as you grow. So if you decide to use a partner, you may want to ask them some really relevant questions, find out if they're a really good fit for your business and also for your project, and also on a personality level to see if they fit with you and that you're all going to get on, because you're going to get to know each other pretty well during this. So maybe you want to ask things like, do they have experience in your industry? Do they have experience with companies that are of a similar size to us? Do they have experience in the Salesforce clouds that you're looking to implement, or the apps that you're wishing to bring onto Salesforce? One interesting question we often get from customers is, what's your implementation methodology? How are you going to approach our project? And how do you run your projects? And how do we work together as a team? It can also be worth finding out who will actually be working on your project, who are the actual consultants or admins that are going to be involved, and just making sure that you like those people and you get on well together, because as I said, you're going to get to know each other pretty well during this process. So we've defined our goals and timescales. We know who's going to be involved in our Salesforce project. So the next step is really where we get into the nitty-gritty of gathering our requirements. So if you're working with a partner, they're likely to take you through a requirements gathering workshop, and they're going to assess your current situation and document your requirements. But what kind of thing do you need to think about when you're gathering your requirements? So firstly, what you want to do is work with each department that you're bringing onto Salesforce. We typically tend to use workshops to do this. And we want to ask each department to compile a list of their responsibilities. So what recurring tasks do they have to do on a day-to-day basis? What are their processes in their department? And which processes also cause the most issues, and which processes sometimes lead to costly mistakes being made. Because at this point you can kind of think about, could any of those costly mistakes be avoided through automating some of the tasks? So once you've got your responsibilities down, your requirements, sorry, what you're going to want to do is prioritize your requirements. And you want to prioritize your requirements based on how important they are to your business and also how feasible they are. So how likely are we going to be able to get this onto Salesforce? So you can use techniques here such as Moscow prioritization. So this is where you take each requirement and you rank them, and you base them on ones which you must have, you should have, you could have, and you won't have. And when you've got that list of prioritized requirements, you really want to document them in a real clear and concise way and validate them with your stakeholders. So you want to go through each of the requirements, possibly in a review meeting with your stakeholders, and make sure that they feel that they accurately reflect the needs of the business and also the expectations in line with the objectives that you've set. Okay, so we've got our requirements, and we know what we need Salesforce to. We know what we need Salesforce to do. So this will then show us if we need any external integrations. So external integrations can be with systems that we already use as a business, or additional Salesforce apps or clouds or apps from the App Exchange. This slide here just shows a few examples of integrations that can be used, but there are actually thousands of apps out there and systems that integrate with Salesforce. So when you're thinking about your integrations, it can be useful to think about the data flow. So from your integration, do you need the data to flow into Salesforce, or do you need the data to flow from Salesforce into your other application, your external application? Or do we need that data to be flowing both ways? And also it's worth thinking about what kind of data is going to be transferred. So are we looking at customer data, financial data, orders? Just have that kind of documented. When we've decided on any integrations that we're going to set up, then I'll add these tasks to your requirements documentation that you've produced before. Okay, everyone's favorite subject, data. Preparing data for your Salesforce implementation can be really critical and quite a time-consuming job, but it's really essential to ensure success of your implementation. You really don't want to spend a lot of time setting up a really great system to go and fill it with really bad data that actually will have an effect on your business for years to come. If you put bad data on there, that's definitely going to have an effect. So some of the general steps that we can go through to prepare our data are identifying all of our different data sources. So it could be from databases, from CRM systems that we're already using, often Excel spreadsheets. And when we've got this data brought together, then we want to analyze the quality of the data. So where is there missing data? Where's there incorrect data? And really have a look at the overall data model that we've got. It's then useful to cleanse that data, so get rid of any duplicates, correct errors that you've got in there, and fill in any missing information. You can do this manually, but there are also external tools that you can use, data cleansing tools. When we've got the data cleansed, deduped, then think about mapping your data. How is the data going to translate into Salesforce, and do we have the fields to hold this data and get it organized and ready to be uploaded? Another important thing not to miss when we're thinking about our data is who's going to own that data. So who is going to own the data in Salesforce? Who's going to be allowed to edit that data, and also who's going to be allowed to view the data in Salesforce. So it could be everybody, but it depends on your security needed in your organization. So one of the most critical parts that sometimes can be overlooked during the adoption of a new system like Salesforce is managing change. Effective change management is really important to the success of a Salesforce implementation. So you want your users to be confident and adopt your system really quickly, and to be confident using it when you go live. And this can really improve your return on investment from Salesforce. So communication is really key to having a smooth transition here. So you should really work to establish a clear communication plan that tells all of your users the purpose of the change. Why are we doing this? What are the benefits going to be? And also, what's the timeline going to be? So how long is this going to take, and when are you going to be using it? Make sure everyone knows that Salesforce is coming and what's going to be expected of them during different phases of the project. So if they're going to be involved in testing, make sure they know it, and also what's going to be expected of them after you've gone live. It can really help to communicate how their daily tasks are going to be changed and what is the benefit to them in their day-to-day job, and what's the overall benefit to the business. So involving stakeholders earlier on, right from the planning and implementation part of the project, will really help you to ensure that your Salesforce implementation meets the needs of the stakeholders, the business, and all of your users, and also that your stakeholders are invested in the success of your project. The stakeholders are going to be the ones within your business who are going to promote that change and make your users feel more positive of the change. Of course, you're always going to come up against some sort of resistance to change. It's really common, but it can be addressed, and it isn't something that has to be a massive problem. It's just addressing it through proactive communication, educating your users, and really engaging with them and listening to what they've got to say. So it's also really vitally important that senior management are bought in and that they're behind the project, because positivity and also user adoption will really flow down your organisation, and the culture comes from above. So having your senior leadership team on board will help with both identifying and addressing any resistance to change, and they'll also help the ultimate success of your project. Okay, so making sure all of your users are really properly trained is also a really good step to managing your change and ensuring that your users are confident when they start to use Salesforce. So creating a training plan ensures that everyone gets the training that they need, and on go live day, they know what they're doing. The goal here really is to create a scalable training program that's really easy to use for people, and it's consistent and it answers everybody's questions. So the first step of creating a training plan really is identifying your different audiences. So different kind of users have distinct goals and they perform different tasks in Salesforce. So you want to focus your training on that person's role and create different training scenarios that are relevant to their day-to-day job. So this means, your users get trained on what they need to know so that they can succeed on a daily basis. So firstly, you want to think about who needs to be trained and then what scenarios or processes they're going to be doing in Salesforce. So for example, on the slide here, we've got a table that shows, your executives, your sales managers and your sales reps and how they might interact with Salesforce. So creating something similar to this would help you develop your training modules, and having a matrix will help you determine, what modules you need to deliver and who you're going to deliver them to. And then this will form a basis of setting up your training sessions and help to put together your training plan for your users. So that's pretty much it. So working together through the structure that Sam and I have kind of talked you through today should really give you a well planned out implementation and the best possible outcome from Salesforce. So, and after these steps, that's when the real fun begins, your actual implementation. So thank you for listening to us today. We do have a free Salesforce implementation checklist that we'll be sending out to everyone that's attended today on LinkedIn. It probably will take us a couple of days because there's no way for us to send it in one go. We have to go to everyone's profile and send you a message. So if you did want it quicker, feel free to connect with either Sam or myself, or both of us, and we'll get that sent out to you straight away. So, but do expect that in your in mailboxes in the next couple of days. Okay, so thank you very much for joining us. I hope that you found that session useful. Again, there's Sam and my contact details on the form. Feel free to connect with us on LinkedIn or send us an email for either of those email addresses, and we can chat on there. Thanks a lot. Bye.